I want you to think about maybe the most gut-wrenching, embarrassing mistake you made this week.
Oh, we're starting right in the deep end.
We are. Because, I mean, put yourself right back in that moment. Your stomach drops, your heart rate spikes, and honestly, you just want to melt right into the floorboards.
Right, yeah, the classic fight or flight panic.
Exactly. Now, imagine grabbing a standard, heavy-duty English dictionary to try and define what just happened to you.
Which would be a very strange coping mechanism, but okay.
Bear with me. Usually that book is like the ultimate rule book of cold, hard objectivity, right? You look up a word like failure or mistake, and you get this clinical, mechanical function.
Right, you get a dry little sentence about like a bank error just to show context.
Yeah, and then you just move on. It is brutally clinical.
Because it functions entirely as an instruction manual for syntax. It tells you what a word does in a sentence, but it is completely indifferent to how that word actually feels to the human experiencing it.
Yes. But imagine if you picked up that dictionary and instead of just handing you that clinical definition, it magically pivoted into being your most empathetic life coach.
I love that framing.
Imagine it taking those cold, literal definitions and reverse engineering them into this deeply personal blueprint for emotional survival.
Which brings us to today's source material.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are exploring excerpts from a truly fascinating text called The Lexicon of the Gentle Spirit.
Specifically, we're looking at entries 451 through 460.
And the mission for us today is to uncover how a simple vocabulary list can actually serve as a profound guide for healing, shifting your perspective and building some serious emotional resilience.
What makes this source material so compelling to me is the architecture of it. It takes the literal mechanical English definition of a word and pairs it with an uplifting philosophical reflection.
Right.
It essentially uses the literal engineering of language to explain the messy emotional reality of being human. And by doing that, it bypasses our usual cynical defenses.
Oh, totally. You think you're just reading a definition, but suddenly you're being handed a crowbar to pry open your own internal roadblocks.
It sneaks up on you.
It really does. So let's talk about that first roadblock. Because if you are listening to this right now, maybe you're on your commute or walking the dog, think about what your brain does when you make a massive error.
It's usually not very kind.
No. If I completely bomb a presentation, my brain doesn't say, hey, you made a mistake. It says, you are a mistake.
Right, you fuse your entire identity to the event.
Exactly. And the lexicon addresses this immediately before it lets us do anything else. It starts with inward survival, introducing a psychological cure by pairing two fascinating words, decouple and suffice.
These are entries 452 and 456. The lexicon treats this pairing as the absolute bedrock of self-worth.
So let's break that down.
Well, if we look at the mechanics, entry 452 defines decouple simply as to separate two things that are connected.
Right, which is an industrial term mostly.
Exactly. You decouple train cars in a rail yard. You decouple machinery. It's a very physical, deliberate severing of a link.
And the lexicon takes that heavy industrial action and applies it straight to the fragile human ego. It says, decouple your worth from your mistakes, because you are still wonderful no matter what happened.
It's so powerful.
I just love the visual of that train car analogy. Think of your core identity as the engine, just driving forward down the track.
And the mistake is the cargo.
Yes. The mistake you made is just a heavy cargo car you were pulling for a couple of miles. But the instinct we all have when we fail is to grab a blowtorch and permanently weld that cargo car of failure to the engine.
We just drag it around forever.
We really do. But the lexicon is giving us permission to pull the pin. Leave that car on the tracks behind you. The engine is entirely unaffected.
And the psychological insight operating under the surface here is actually rooted in how we process trauma and memory.
Oh, how so?
Well, our brains have a built-in negativity bias. From an evolutionary standpoint, remembering our failures and the things that hurt us kept us alive.
So we're biologically wired to hold on to the bad stuff.
Exactly. The mind naturally wants to fuse the self to the failure to ensure we never make that same mistake again. The lexicon understands that we can't just wish away our mistakes or, pretend the connection didn't exist.
Right, the mistake still happened. The cargo car is real.
It is real, but the act of decoupling is an active, deliberate cognitive override. You are consciously severing the tie between the temporary event and your permanent identity.
Which brings us perfectly to the second word in that pairing. Entry 456, suffice.
The literal definition there is to be enough for a particular purpose.
And the lexicon's reflection tells us just being yourself will always suffice. You don't need to be anyone else today.
The causality between these two words is where the brilliance really lies.
What do you mean by causality there?
Well, the literal act of sufficing, of genuinely feeling in your bones that you are enough, is biologically and psychologically impossible until you deliberately decouple your identity from your failures.
Oh, wow. Because the failure's weighing down the balance sheet.
Exactly. As long as your self-worth is tethered to a mistake, you will always feel a deficit. You will constantly feel this frantic need to perform, to overcompensate, to put on a mask and be someone else today, just to pay off the emotional debt of that error.
You're stripping away the exhaust pipe of anxiety.
Precisely.
Once you pull the pin and decouple the mistake, you realize there is no debt to pay. You don't have to hustle for your worth. You're left with just you. And that baseline is enough.
It is always enough.
But here is the friction, right? Let's say you've done the internal work, you decoupled the mistake, you feel secure in your identity.
Right.
You still have to wake up and deal with a massive looming crisis in your life. I mean, the external world doesn't stop just because you feel centered.
It certainly doesn't. And the lexicon anticipates this exact transition from past mistakes to present crises.
It shifts gears.
It does. It shifts from self-worth to cognitive reframing, specifically by introducing entries 457 and 459, flip and perpetual.
Okay, let's get into those.
It suggests a fundamental alteration of how we perceive time and circumstance. Entry 457 defines flip as to turn something over quickly to the other side.
Right. And the text then advises us to flip your perspective when things feel heavy, noting that the back of a problem often hides a little hope.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to push back on this pretty hard.
Go for it.
Because flipping a perspective sounds fantastic when it's printed in a nice font on a greeting card, you know?
It sounds very easy.
Right. But when you are in the thick of a massive, suffocating, seemingly endless problem, say a financial crisis or a scary health diagnosis, you can't just lightly flip it over like a pancake.
No, of course not.
It feels like a multi-ton boulder. Telling someone to just look on the bright side when they are actively being crushed under a boulder borders on toxic positivity.
That reaction is incredibly common, and honestly, it's exactly why the lexicon doesn't leave the concept of flip floating in a vacuum.
Okay, so how does it anchor it?
It anchors it with entry 459, perpetual. The literal definition of perpetual is continuing for a very long time without stopping.
Right.
The text then delivers this profoundly grounding truth. It says, no pain is perpetual. The rain will stop and a quiet morning will surely come to you. It isn't suggesting you magically force a smile while you are being crushed by the boulder. It is identifying the exact cognitive lever you need to pull to make that boulder light enough to move.
Okay, but I am struggling with the physics of that cognitive lever. When I'm going through a crisis, my brain literally cannot fathom it ending. It feels like this dark tunnel is my permanent zip code.
Yes.
Are you saying the trick is to hack that sense of time?
That is the core mechanism. The heaviest part of any crisis is rarely the acute pain of the moment. The true weight actually comes from the illusion of endlessness.
Oh, the illusion of endlessness.
Right. When you are in the dark, the mind's temporal perception distorts. It tricks you into believing the dark is a perpetual state. That illusion of permanence is the actual weight of the boulder.
Wow.
The lexicon is revealing that recognizing the pain as not perpetual is the lever. Once you shatter that illusion of endlessness, once you force your brain to remember that the rain absolutely will stop and the quiet morning will arrive, the problem instantly loses a massive amount of its mass.
That completely recontextualizes the advice for me. The illusion of endlessness is the weight.
Exactly.
If you know the storm has an expiration date, you can endure the rain, you can look at the back of the problem and find the hidden hope, which isn't some naive silver lining.
No, not at all.
The hope is simply the temporal reality that this will eventually pass. That quiet morning isn't toxic positivity, it's just an inevitable fact. Everything passes.
It is an incredibly pragmatic, almost gritty form of hope. It doesn't deny the heavy, brutal reality of the rainstorm. It simply refuses to accept its permanence.
So, we've pulled the pin on our past mistakes. We've hacked our perception of time to survive our current storms.
Yeah.
But eventually, you have to leave your house.
Unfortunately, yes.
You have to step into an unpredictable world full of other people who are carrying their own undecoupled mistakes and their own perpetual storms.
And when those worlds meet, there is friction.
A lot of friction. And the lexicon addresses this social friction through the concepts of collision and scarcity.
This is where the internal philosophy crashes into the external reality. Entry 455 defines collision as an accident where two things or people hit each other.
Which is usually a bad thing.
Right. In everyday life, we view collisions as inherently catastrophic. They are destructive. They cause damage and insurance claims.
Yeah, nobody wants a collision.
Exactly. Consequently, we spend our lives trying to avoid collisions of any kind. We avoid physical collisions. We dodge emotional confrontations. We mute people with ideological differences online. We treat social friction as a threat.
We treat every collision like a devastating car crash on the highway.
Yes.
But the lexicon totally flips the script on this. It says, a collision with others can be a beginning. It is a chance to see a world you never knew.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
It is. Instead of viewing a collision as two cars getting totaled, it feels like the lexicon is asking us to view human interaction more like a particle accelerator.
I think that's a perfect analogy. Think about the intention behind a particle accelerator. The scientists aren't smashing atoms together because they want to destroy the facility.
Right, they aren't just trying to break things for fun.
No, they're introducing extreme velocity and friction because they want to break open the elements to see the fundamental building blocks inside. They smash them together to discover entirely new particles that didn't exist before the impact.
Yes. You aren't crashing to destroy, you are crashing to split the atom and find a new connection in the debris.
Exactly.
A collision is a spark. It's a chance to see a world you never knew existed inside someone else. But honestly, willingly stepping into a particle accelerator with strangers requires an absurd amount of trust.
It really does.
Most of us walk around with our shields up because we are terrified of being depleted by other people.
And that defensive posture stems directly from fear, which brings us perfectly to the balancing concept in entry 454, scarcity.
Right.
The text defines scarcity as a situation where there is not enough of something. And the reflection is framed as a direct, almost urgent command. It says, don't live in scarcity. Love and kindness are always waiting for you to find them.
It's a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Because if you view the world through a lens of scarcity, if you deep down believe that resources, patience, empathy, and love are strictly limited commodities that might run out, then a collision with another person is terrifying.
It's an existential risk.
Exactly. It is a direct threat to your limited supply of energy. You lock your doors. But if you adopt the lexicon's worldview, that love and kindness are infinitely abundant, your entire posture changes.
A collision is no longer a threat to your reserves because the reserves are endless. It becomes exactly what the particle accelerator metaphor suggests, a safe environment for a spark.
Right.
You aren't worried about losing pieces of yourself in the crash because you believe there is always more kindness waiting to be found to repair whatever gets dented.
It's the difference between fiercely guarding a tiny puddle of water in the desert versus standing on the shore of the ocean.
Oh, that's good.
If you know you have the ocean behind you, you really don't mind getting splashed. There's plenty of water to go around.
Absolutely.
But let's be real for a second. Even in an abundant world, engaging deeply and openly with others takes an immense amount of social energy. We all have a social battery.
And being open to collisions all day long will drain it rapidly.
Yes. So how do we protect our peace in a loud world without shutting ourselves in a bunker? The lexicon gives us this wildly surprising pairing to answer that: emphatic and mischievous.
This is arguably the most nuanced and initially confusing pairing in the entire document.
It really is.
Entry 458 is emphatic, defined as showing or giving emphasis very clearly. The lexicon urges us to be emphatic about your own peace.
Right.
It aggressively validates that it is okay to say no to protect your heart. It advocates for a very firm, unyielding stance on your personal boundaries.
And then literally right alongside that heavy armor, it gives us entry 451, mischievous.
Right.
The definition is enjoying causing little bits of trouble in a playful way. And the text says, sometimes it is okay to be mischievous. A little playfulness will heal your tired heart.
It's quite the contrast.
I have to pause the cape here because these two concepts seem to be at war with each other.
Yeah.
Being emphatic paints the picture of a stoic bouncer at a nightclub with his arms crossed.
Very.
Yeah. And being mischievous sounds like the guy sneaking in through the bathroom window to cause a ruckus. How do those two realities live inside the same body? How can you be fiercely, rigidly protective of your boundaries and also out causing playful trouble?
It definitely looks like a contradiction if you view them as simultaneous actions, but the lexicon is actually presenting them as a symbiotic ecosystem.
Symbiotic. How so?
They rely entirely on one another to understand why. Look at the symptom the lexicon is trying to cure here, the tired heart.
Okay.
Why does the human heart get so exhausted in the modern world? Usually it's the result of a boundaryless existence. It is the fatigue of overexposure, of constantly navigating the demands, emails, and crises of other people without a filter.
That sounds extremely familiar.
Right, so to heal that profound exhaustion, the text prescribes playfulness and little bits of trouble.
Because mischief is a release valve. Playfulness fundamentally breaks the rigid, serious rules of stress. Mischief is the ultimate antidote to anxiety, because anxiety demands that you take the world incredibly seriously, and mischief just refuses to comply.
Exactly the point. However, and this is the structural genius of the pairing, you cannot truly relax and be playfully mischievous if your nervous system feels unsafe or exposed to the elements.
Oh, I see.
You can only play freely when you know you are protected. Establishing emphatic boundaries, looking someone in the eye and clearly saying no to an obligation that drains you is the act of building the walls of your sanctuary.
The armor.
Exactly. Emphatic boundaries are the rigid, towering armor that creates a safe, protected inner courtyard.
Going back to my nightclub analogy,
Yeah.
the bouncer at the door creates the safe space for the party inside.
Perfect. Yeah.
If you aren't emphatic at the gate, the world will flood in, drain your energy, and you won't have an ounce of spirit left over for playfulness. You'll just be completely hollowed out.
The rigid armor is what actually allows the soft joy to exist.
The no creates the physical and emotional space for the yes. That is a brilliant way to navigate burnout.
It really gives you permission to be ruthless with your time so that you can be gentle with your soul.
So let's look at the map we've drawn. Our boundaries are firmly set at the gate. Our spirit is actively healing through safe, mischievous play. We've flipped our perspective on time, and we've decoupled our core worth from our past errors.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, and we are finally ready to move forward. But what is the actual destination? How does the lexicon guide us into the future?
Well, it leaves us with a pairing that reminds us we aren't meant to walk into that future alone. Idealistic and coalition.
Okay, lay them out for us.
Entry 453 defines idealistic as believing that very good things can be achieved. The lexicon elevates this trait, calling it a beautiful gift, and encourages the reader to keep holding on to the light that you believe in.
Which honestly is a very brave stance for a text to take today.
Why do you say that?
Well, being idealistic is one of those qualities that sounds beautiful in poetry, but in the gritty reality of the modern world, it gets ruthlessly mocked.
That's true.
If you call a colleague idealistic in a corporate boardroom, you aren't complimenting them. It's a polite way of calling them naive, or suggesting their head is in the clouds and they don't understand how the harsh, real world operates.
It's almost an insult.
Exactly. Holding on to that internal light can feel intensely isolating when everyone around you has adopted cynicism as a defense mechanism.
And cynicism is often just a shield for disappointed idealists. The lexicon anticipates that specific vulnerability, the deep loneliness of hoping for better things in a cynical environment.
So how does it counter that?
That is precisely why it immediately grounds the lofty concept of idealism with the pragmatic muscle of entry 460, coalition.
Oh, okay.
A coalition is defined literally as a group of people who work together for a goal. The text advises us to build a coalition with your friends because you don't have to carry the heavy bags alone.
I love that imagery. It takes this abstract, intellectual concept of idealism, staring up at the stars, holding a candle in the wind, and pairs it with the sweaty, grounded, intensely physical imagery of carrying heavy luggage.
It democratizes the idealism. The lexicon is warning us that idealism should never be a solitary pursuit.
Right.
If you try to hold on to that light completely by yourself, the sheer weight of the cynical world, those heavy bags of doubt and pushback, will eventually crush your spirit. But by forming a coalition, you distribute the mass of that burden.
It turns hope into a team sport.
Yeah.
You aren't just one person stubbornly trying to shield a flickering flame with your own hands. You are gathering a group of people to stand shoulder to shoulder in a circle around the flame to protect it together.
Beautifully said.
You build a coalition to carry the heavy bags toward that better future. The message is that you don't ever have to surrender your ideals to the real world. You just need to recruit enough friends to help you make the ideal real.
And that is the ultimate trajectory of the lexicon. It meticulously guides the reader from the deepest, most suffocating isolation of a personal mistake all the way out into a thriving, supportive, forward-moving community.
It really is a remarkable roadmap. Just to recap the terrain we've covered today for you all listening. We started in the rail yard, pulling the pin to decouple our core self-worth from our mistakes, establishing that we suffice just as we are.
Right.
From there, we learned to shatter the cognitive illusion of perpetual pain, which gave us the leverage to flip our heaviest problems and locate the hidden hope of a quiet morning.
And then we ventured outward into the friction of society, choosing to reject the defensive crouch of scarcity and instead embrace collisions as particle accelerators. Just beautiful sparks of discovery.
We uncovered the vital importance of being emphatic and ruthless about our boundaries, erecting a fortress where our mischievous playfulness can safely heal our exhausted hearts.
And finally, we realized that the beautiful gift of being idealistic isn't naive in the slightest, as long as we build a coalition to help us carry the heavy bags into tomorrow.
It all circles back to the incredible power of definitions. This lexicon proves that the words we choose hold immense psychological power. The way we define the events in our lives, whether a mistake is a permanent tattoo or a decoupled train car, whether a collision is a devastating crash or a spark of discovery, directly dictates the emotional reality we are forced to live in.
The literal mechanics of our circumstances are very often unchangeable, but the definitions and meanings we assign to them are entirely within our jurisdiction.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to carry into your week. If a simple standard dictionary can be entirely rewritten to serve as a profound survival guide for a gentle spirit, what would happen if you rewrote the definitions of the everyday objects and routines in your own life?
That's a great question.
What would the lexicon of your daily commute look like? Or your cubicle at work? Or even the mundane household chores you dread doing? If you defined those things today, not by their cold, literal functions, but by their emotional utility, what hidden hope might you find on the back of them? Think about that next time you open the dictionary of your own life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.